and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my real top niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day pepping America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclose a bit holes at the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money brought your great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa, thanks baby you made me a billion, plus I own a building for each one of my children's children.
And we are live.
We are live. Welcome to Voice of Rebellion Radio. This is your one and only co-host, Chris J, speaking here. It is Sunday night, and probably after this weekend, I bet a lot of people are not exactly dreading tomorrow because it was a very cold weekend. There wasn't much to do for a lot of people, unless you live in the great old state of Florida, where we deal with other problems such as people eat each other's faces off after doing bath salts down in Miami, or other bizarre stories like, oh, a meth lab found in a daycare center down in Sarasota. I don't know, that sounds like a Florida headline, whatever, but still, at least it's warm here. Anyways, we are broadcasting here tonight on 3 different stations. UCY Radio, of course, as our now what's technically our home station, Real Liberty Media, with a direct uplink right back to UCY, and of course worldtruth.org. So we are broadcasting 3 different platforms, and all people that are listening tonight and come from different networks and places, we definitely welcome all of you to listen to a good show tonight. We are talking about, it is 2016. I'm surprised it hasn't already happened yet. It's this deck of cards that we call an economic and financial system in the United States and the Western countries. But we're talking about just this deck of cards. It's the fiat currency system. We're talking about what's the difference between currency and money. And we're talking about what things other countries are doing that are beneficial, and what we're doing that's economic suicide that's happening right now in the United States. And a lot of people are going to be distracted right now in the next couple of months. They're not going to really be thinking about, seeing the stock market crash, which is not ultimately an economic indicator, because that's going to be going through the roof, but there'll be higher poverty than ever. That just really benefits the hands of a few rich people. So that's how Wall Street works. But right now that's crashing. All these other economic indicators are crashing. All these other economic indicators are going down. The third world allies, or colonies of the empire, allies, colonies, whatever you want to call them, right now are suffering tremendously with right now terrible inflation in Colombia, Mexico, and Latin America. The countries that are close connected to the dollar are falling first, it looks like, before the actual empire comes down with them. And these allies of the United States are suffering tremendously in poor decisions or being coerced and forced into this relationship with the United States and London and Western bankers has resulted right now in what a lot of people have been worrying them about for years, and that they'll be the first to go when the economy. It always was something that was constructed out of shit, but in imaginary concepts and imaginary, pretty much is a big giant game that the big bankers set up where they always win because they made up the game. But now that it's actually being realized, a lot of the world is not playing into their game, or at least may not a lot of the world, but probably some of the most important players in the world have stopped playing into the game. And that means, folks, that what we're about to see is that whole monopoly board being flipped right upside down, because people realize that, well, looks like Jacob Rothschild, well, he already put hotels on Boardwalk, Park Place, Pennsylvania, all those other green properties that I can't remember because I haven't played Monopoly since I was like 9 years old. But you get the point, is that they rig the game to start for them to win always, and then they hand you the people, you get Baltic Avenue, which I'm pretty sure is a purple one, and I know that sucks. And you don't even get to put houses or anything on there. No, you get like the $4 rent when the Jacob passes by, but you have to pay the $2,000, and you seem to land on Boardwalk every time. Maybe the dice are rigged. In fact, they are rigged. But what we are seeing right now is fiat currency is now the colonies pegged to this fiat currency right now are starting to have terrible inflation on their own currencies that don't actually have any real sovereignty. So in a way, it's almost a direct reflector of what's to come of the U.S. dollar within by the end of the year. We are seeing just inflation that has been unparalleled really in recent times over the Western Hemisphere. It doesn't seem like African countries, this is not too much out of the usual. But in America's colonies in South America and then with Colombia right now, they have, and this is a true story, and that just since November, it was 2,750 pesos to $1. And then since then, in November to now, in January, just 2 months later, we're talking about it. I mean, this is literally we're talking about going just a little over 2 months from one part of November to one part in January, and one part in January being now. That was actually a few weeks ago. I saw that last indicator. So that one part in January is actually we're talking about a couple weeks ago. So it could be even worse now. But right now, it literally went from 2,750 to 3,300 pesos, 3,300 pesos to $1 just in within 2 months, which is a 20% inflation just in 2 months, which is very bad sign. It's a symptom of hyperinflation, definitely. It's not technically hyperinflation yet, but this is how the ball starts getting rolling, because it seems like whenever there's hyperinflation, it starts off with what seems to be a correctable inflation, and then it just starts to go spiral out of control, like what happened back in Germany in the early 1920s, where we had, but that was maybe the worst example of inflation set on by the bankers and economic warfare, the punishment to the Germans after the Treaty of Versailles, and it literally went from 4.3 Deutschmarks to $1 to 4.3 trillion Deutschmarks to $1. Literally a devaluation of 1 trillion times, which is just incredible to think that anybody could have even survived after that. Which in Germany, during the 20s, literally were burning money to keep warm. And one of the most alarming things is literally the whole country, a lot of it started to go back into the Stone Age. People really started to live without technology, live without any modern conveniences. And it was just one of the most incredible things really that's happened in the 20th century. Was just, it was it was probably unthinkable if you would have told a German in 1912, 10 years before the inflation hits, that this would happen to them. In 1912, Germany is still at their height of their power. They are the German Empire controlling a giant economy and a very stable country. And then 2 years later, they get themselves to World War I. And then after that, in 1918, when that ends, Western powers feel compelled to punish them. And then 1919, Treaty of Versailles put it on them. And after that, they suffered tremendously economically, starting in 1920 and ending in 1922. Started in 1920 and went to 1923, I would say, which is just 3 years that fall from economic supremacy, practically, that Germany wanted to have in Europe at one point. Before World War I, Germany was a very prosperous country and was very technologically advanced. One of the most notable things about it was it was for 1914, the Air Force was probably what most countries wouldn't even get to until about 1930. So it was 20 years ahead of everybody on the Air Force. Experimental technologies, for example, stuff that would lead to the invention of the television, practical television, and radio technology. I think Germany was, again, like 20 years ahead of everybody when you talk about the German Empire. And also, it seemed like there was just this whole school of right minds in Germany that were just pumping out at the turn of the century. I mean, all things were looking up, and that's how just quickly it escalated. In 1914, we did Serbia, a Serbian belonging to I believe it was the Black Hand was the name of the society that Gavrilo Princip belonged to, kills Archduke Ferdinand, and then after that, Austria-Hungary puts a place of restrictions on Serbia, pretty much demanding that, well, you have one of your guys killed one of our leaders right now, and we're just going to put this, we're going to ask you to do a few things here, and they gave them 10 lists of things, and actually, believe it or not, Serbia did follow 8 of them, but it wasn't good enough for Austria-Hungary, and it's kind of questionable who exactly started the aggression first. Definitely Austria-Hungary led the march first into the country. I think it's kind of unclear. It doesn't seem to be too many details. It seems like almost an assumption made that Austria-Hungary shot first at the Serbians, but there's a possibility could have went the other way. But the point is that after that, Germany jumped in. And that's also another thing. People think that Germany started the war, which, again, it doesn't seem to have too much credit, because it's even questionable if the Central Powers started the war. And Austria and Germany didn't even jump in first. Actually, Serbia and Austria-Hungary started fighting before Germany jumped in. And everybody, it was pretty much like it was set to happen for 30 years, that war. Kind of like what we're seeing right now with the United States, getting ready, this bubbling between the United States, Iran, Syria, all this tension. That it just, everybody's known for probably a good 25 years that at one point the United States would enter Iran one way or another. Israel would push the United States in. And, the United States, right now might be acting like they're at a time of calm. However, just a lull to get the Iraq. It's like what they did to Saddam during in 2002, where they signed treaties with Saddam, and then in 2003 they go in and invade his country in February, and then they capture him by December. So, and I think that's about a right timeline, because the deal was signed last summer, and I think it's very likely that we'll be seen by, that was the treaties and stuff was signed almost about a year before. I don't know, sometime in 2002, I think, was when those treaties were signed, and they said they would, send in inspectors and say, oh, we'll get rid of the chemical weapons or whatever for you, and we'll be good for now. Kind of like what they did to Assad in 2013. and then they just invaded the country in 2014 under the guise of fighting ISIS. However, the fact is they bombed Assad's warehouses. They funded ISIS all along and did military support to ISIS all along. McCain even's in a freaking picture with al-Baghdadi, which al-Baghdadi's identity is he's not even Iraqi, whatever. He's a Israeli agent, is what a lot of people saying. His real name is Shimon Elliott. But you see McCain meeting Shimon Elliott. You see McCain saying we need to fund ISIS back in 2013 before anybody even knew what ISIS was. So it just sounds like another opposition group, which they are, another opposition group. But all the opposition groups in Syria that are, I'm talking about the Syrian opposition here, are just terrorists, mercenaries to take down Assad because he's anti-Rothschild and anti-Zionist. And they're going to try to go in and take the oil and all the natural resources and then put a puppet in there that will be subservient to the United States and then put in a Rothschild bank. It's a formula that happens over and over again. It seems like throughout history, wars and economic turmoil seem to happen around the same time. I mean, we had World War I, which actually was followed by an American time of economic turmoil in a way. It was a opportunist situation. What happened, which was in 1907, there was a panic in the United States, and that led to a lot of uncertainty about the economic future of the United States, and people said, people thought, that it maybe was not regulated enough, and there was these big bankers saying, yeah, it's not regulated enough or whatever, and we're going to be the people that's going to save it from being, from falling apart. And the Federal Reserve bankers come up in 1910 and pretty much plot this out at Jekyll Island to make a central bank in the United States that would be privately controlled by them, and then any other future private investors, and Rothschild, Morgan, Rockefellers, they were all there, and they figured that they will just make sure that whoever wins 1912 will be a president that they can control a puppet, and that puppet was Woodrow Wilson, and Woodrow Wilson, they had planned to bring him into power all the way up to that point, to make him sign the Federal Reserve Act in 1913 under pretty secretive conditions. I mean, it was done while everybody was on Christmas break, and he signed it December 23rd, 1913, without a soul knowing what he had just done. It was December 23rd, 1913. So it went under the radar, and people didn't realize the changes it would do to the economy for the next few years. Well, they wouldn't really know until 16 years later, when something very big because of the Federal Reserve would happen. And right after that, pretty much the bankers take full out control of the United States. And shortly after, World War I happens, and the United States gets dragged into a war that they have no part of. They have the Lusitania false flag happen, which is, I'll tell you a couple of reasons why that was a false flag. Number one, Lusitania, the Germans warned the Americans that boat would be sunk, and if you boarded it, you were risking your lives. Number two, Churchill, who's just a member of the Navy at the time over in Britain, knew where all the submarines were in the Atlantic and could have told them to avoid here, here, and here, and here, and here if you want to get out safely. Number three, and this is a big one, is that while this ship was put with arms in the bottom and used to people on the boat as human shields, and people say that, well, the American official story was that it was just small arms. However, the small arms, pistols and stuff like that, wasn't that. It was bombs, and people witnessed explosions that were coming from something that was way more than the torpedo. In fact, the torpedo probably hit the explosions on impact, and that's what caused the very quick sinking of the Lusitania. Number 4 is that they literally put an ad in the newspaper saying, "Don't get on the boat or you'll probably die." All right, the Germans gave a warning the day before, and everybody got on the ship, and the Americans did nothing to, cancel their journey for safety. And the reason why is because the United States government wanted to get America into a war that they had no part of. It was a war in Europe, which in Europe at that time might as well have been once a Timbuktu. It was just the war that was between European countries, and you didn't see, for example, you didn't see China get into the war. What you saw was, but you see the United States get into the war, and they become one of the main Allied powers after Russia drops out after the Bolshevik Revolution. They pretty much take the place, actually, of the Russians during the war. But with all this, and then there's this, then there's after that we have, somewhat of a boom period in the United States, and then 1929 we have the Great Depression starts after the stock market crashes, which the super rich didn't get any poorer at that time, but everybody else got poorer. The super rich got even richer, and they pretty much after that set the stage for World War II. Was using that Prussian era politics in Germany. They were able to bring up their guy Hitler over there, and it set the stage for World War II. Because towards the end of the Depression, it happened in World War II, 1939, late 1939, and then so you can see both the world wars happened after some economic event from the wars happened, and it's very likely that we were seeing a similar recipe. Either the big economic event happens before or after the big war, or some. I would think, in some ways, I think that the big war is going to start before. As I see just the handwriting on the walls right now in Syria, where they might be sending huge amounts of soldiers into Syria very soon, and they even say that these soldiers are not specifically reserved to fight ISIS, but actually to fight Assad. What that means by that is that, we're actually fighting Assad. And people have just been lied to by the media. They still believe the media is bullshit. About that the United States is fighting ISIS, and that they're the country fighting ISIS, which the lead country fighting ISIS is actually Russia. Putin has dedicated soldiers since September to fighting ISIS, and since then they've just practically obliterated them in Syria. And what we are actually seeing right now is possibly nearing a wrap in the Syrian civil war. As right now, ISIS falling is also, of course, all their allies are coming down with them in Syria, the First Syrian Army and the Islamic Front. And soon you might be seeing a complete defeat of the Syrian rebels, unless the United States jumps in to save them, which, as you see, the rhetoric again, I saw it heated up the last 2 days, where they might be entering Syria. They're talking about putting more boots on the ground. And if you enter Syria, there's more than 15,000 Iranian soldiers waiting for you when you get there. So it's automatically declaring war on Iran. And I've been just waiting for a while for when this will happen, because it seems like it got delayed. I was thinking that would definitely happen. I was thinking it would happen before the end of 2015, but we're actually just started 2016, so it wasn't too late. I'm thinking it would happen I think that we are seeing it's a classical build up to what usually happens before a world war. I mean, it never seemed to happen overnight. But yeah, the one big event might happen overnight that sends up a war. It builds up. It's like War One that built up for 30 years before World War One actually happened. That went way before, went all the way back into the 19th century and went into past the turn of the century into the 20th century, and then right there in 1914 it actually happened. War II, it had built up for a good 6-7 years before it actually happened, and this it's kind of in between because in a way the actual real build up it's been only about 4 or 5 years, but think about it. How long has they've been antagonizing Syria? How long have they been antagonizing Iran? Well, they've been antagonizing Syria for probably the last 20 years or so, and they've been antagonizing Iran for practically ever since the Carter administration. I guess you could say maybe since the 80s, really, about the late 80s when they really started to talk about they started talking about the Iranian nuclear bomb threat. That they kept saying, "Oh, the Iranians will get nuclear weapons in 6 months." But really, since the late 80s has been the build-up. And the fear-mongering goes back a long time. The hardest fear-mongering really has been the last 5 years, but it wasn't. There was always the heart of it in the 80s and 90s. They really built it up. Of course, they had to justify supporting Saddam Hussein, who they funded in the 80s. Remember, more than 1 million people died in that war. That was a war between Iraq and Iran. And that was the only war that Iran, I think, has been in the 20th century. And that was because Iran got invaded by Iraq. Saddam funded all the terrorists in this country to try to destabilize Iran. And Iran, they funded their own group after the invasion. They actually funded a group that actually now has connections to the group that's now in control of Iraq today. And I think that's what also, you hear a lot of this rhetoric right now, this 2016 election debate, whatever, and all candidates seem to be on board with going back to Iraq, which just sounds crazy at this point. It's been 15 years we've been talking about Iraq.
Hey, Chris.
And, yeah.
Hey, let me interrupt you for a minute. You was having really great audio, and now we're getting a little background noise. I was wondering, you're probably moving around, maybe navigating through on your tablet right now. And I was wondering if you want to
I wasn't
go ahead
moving or anything.
or call in. I'll add you by telephone.
On the last few minutes,
We'll have Harrison here also, if you'd like.
I don't know what's causing the audio disruption, but we'll see. I was not to get back to my train of thought. I was thinking I was talking about Iraq, and I was talking about is that what I think is happening right now is why they want to go back to continue this long excursion in Iraq is that the fact is that the leader that's now in charge of Iraq is actually more detrimental to the United States policy than really, than what they wanted. In 2008, Iraq looked to become another colony of the United States, but at this point, what seems to be happening is that Iraq is exerting sovereignty over the United States, and it's pretty much told the United States to back off. You're not helping with this ISIS scenario. You're just funding ISIS. 81% of my people think you're funding ISIS. We caught you dropping supplies to ISIS. We've even shot on your aircraft while you were trying to aid ISIS. I think that's happened. And the Iraqi government has just kind of he just kind of said, you know what? It's like he thought we would be completely subservient to your bullshit, but we're actually going to move away from you guys because you guys. I think that what the Iraqi government were not, smart bastards that were put in place and knew exactly what they were doing by working with the United States to become a colony. But maybe they were just dumb bastards that didn't know at first what was going on, and they learned. And it might have cost a lot at the beginning, but now they've learned, and now they know that they cannot trust the United States on foreign policy in Iraq, which you would hope that anybody that was in any position of power would know that. I just figured they need the people that, these puppets that put in. I figured that they're just, those are smart bastards and know exactly what they're doing, but they get paid well. That's what I figured from like Colombian president or a Mexican president or, I think the Mexican president has a bit of a Machiavellian complex himself. He actually might be dumb enough at times to think that he does have no power when he doesn't. I think that finally they've gone smart. They've finally realized the foreign policy in the United States will not work in Iraq, and now they actually have successfully pushed back terrorists to the smallest amount of territories that they've had in probably over 10 years. The Iraqi territory that's controlled by ISIS is just the small parts in the west, but not much compared to like in 2014 where the whole country was under siege and we were talking about possibility that Baghdad was going to be taken over by ISIS and the entire country would be ran over by ISIS, and there was units, and we're talking on TV, they were trying to say almost like, oh yeah, this is better than that dictator that currently controls Iraq being in power. See, the United States government already made their turn on the Iraqi government at that point, and they already decided the Iraqi government would become was I guess for them, and that they would just give up and treat him as enemy. And I think that if they come back, it's going to be another government removal, and they're going to put in another puppet that probably the job this time for that. I could see definitely states re-entering Iraq. I don't see what would be too much at this motive of Afghanistan. They're already country. I think it's really just a forced colonization, and that's why they have an agreement with that 10 more years served. Well, now at this point, it's actually 8 more years. They've already went through 2 years almost of the contract. It's still all the way up to 2024. So by the time they're done with this, they'll have been there for 23 years. By the way, if anybody wants to call in number 718-717-8296. 718-717-8296. And we, well, I'll just go tie back into the economics, of course, is that with the instability over there, but mainly, one of the main things that we're seeing with the Middle East is the oil, and the oil wars that's not being fought on a battlefield, but it's being fought on the stock markets. That is the wars of devaluation of oil. As they're seeing Saudi Arabia is charging, they're selling oil at $27 a barrel. Has pretty much forced the price becomes $27 a barrel. They are intentionally selling oil way cheaper, well below cost, in order to run their competitors out of business. And they're trying to put Iran out of business. It's very hard for them to compete with the same very low oil costs. And the United States buys Saudi oil by the bunches, and they are very closely allied with the terrorist regime of Saudi Arabia and this oppressive regime of Saudi Arabia that keeps the human rights of that country back 200 years. But the oil that the Saudis are selling is so cheap, it's driving down the oil prices so low at this point where water is cheaper than oil. At $27 a barrel, I'm pretty sure a barrel is 105 gallons or something like that. So what is actually being sold before anything's done to it? That means that it is, round it to $100 a barrel. Let's say that's 27 cents, which that's ridiculous. And you can see why it's very easy for oil to be sold at $1 or so at the pumps. And people say, oh, great, oil's low, but it's an indicator of a possible crash nearby. I mean, think about it, before around 2008, when we had the crash, oil was being sold at $1.49. That was actually shortly after the 08 crash, and it's what could be happening the last few weeks. It ended pretty ugly Friday, I'm pretty sure, but it definitely 16-year economically has just been pretty bad. And what we can be seeing tomorrow and Tuesday into next week, we can just see it keep rolling and rolling. I mean, it went down 2,000 points, the stock market. And that's not a good indicator, but all the other indicators are showing a lot of negativity right now. Speculation is driving down the market. What we are also seeing is that Mexico, one of America's closest colonies, is suffering terribly economically, where I believe at one point, just a few years ago, it was like 12, or their currency was not that bad with exchange rate to dollars. It was like 12 or 8 Mexican pesos to a dollar. Now that number it's 20 Mexican pesos to a dollar, which is only a nickel. It's about double what it was just a few years ago. More money you can get from the dollar to the Mexican peso. It's been devalued by half. And this is the worst rate that Mexican pesos have went by since ever. It's the worst ever. And it was just terrible inflation. This terrible inflation we are seeing in the allies of the United States, and people talk about the Russian crash or whatever they say that happened in 2014, but none of those events were anything compared to what's going on in Mexico, Colombia, probably Turkey soon, and also possibly Dubai. But what we saw in Russia, it was just a small reaction to the sanctions. And we were seeing a potential. There was a devaluation somewhat. However, it bounced back. Not that as they worked around the sanctions, and at this point, yes, it's been a little bit lethargic compared to maybe where it was at the height, where Russia was considered booming since 2012, 2013. It's still not a crash, and what we're seeing is what we saw there was what we're seeing now is kind of it's the adjustment period for the Russian ruble, that they're actually going to back their money by gold soon, and we're going to get the gold ruble. Gold ruble will be a very important step forward for Russia, because that will pretty much secure no more inflation for the Russian ruble, no more erratic fluctuations of the ruble. When we had silver certificates prior to the Federal Reserve, we never saw any inflation. We didn't see inflation nearly at the rates that we see in modern times, or especially from inflation toward the is it the cost of buying products for different items. I mean, for different commodities, like for food, there's a lot of buying power. Where just for a few years ago, you went to fast food or whatever, you could get a few hamburgers and maybe some fries, and it would only be $10, and the same thing's $20 now. It's literally doubled just in a few years. When it comes to food and other items, it's went up maybe 25%. We are seeing very quick inflation also here in the United States, but not as bad as some of these other countries where it's inflated multiple times in some of these countries. Argentina, with the return of the far-right president, Mauricio Macri, who very much parallels the rhetoric of the military dictatorship of the 80s in Argentina, and also just that period, that the ultimate thing, that negative outcome of the entire Argentine dictatorship was the '01 crash of the Argentine economy. And it seems like it's just a foreshadowing. This guy comes back in the power, and next thing you know, you're going to be seeing another crash there in Argentina, which the Argentina is now going to become back on the warm side of the United States pretty quickly with the new government there in charge of no longer Kirchner, who, of course, wasn't warm to the United States. In fact, she accused the United States of attempting to assassinate her. The Argentinian, well, of course, they were not friendly at all with Israel, and they had a rule that if you try to become a dual citizen, well, guess what? Kiss your Argentine citizenship away, because you can't be loyal to a country that wants to destroy societally Argentina. And in the past, the Zionist bankers have caused a lot of problems and Israel and the Zionist bankers have caused a lot of problems for Argentina. And now we're going to see it again. That in other countries that were, Guatemala, there's a pretty, actually Honduras is the one that's really suffering right now in Central America. America's allies, forced allies. Honduras was a country that had gone away from the West for a short time, but there was a coup initiated practically at the order of Hillary Clinton and put in a dictator into Honduras. And this isn't a political coup. This isn't a backdoor, election irregular. I can't even pronounce that word. Irregular. Okay, it wasn't an election, mishap or whatever that led to the led to the coup. It was a gun. It was an armed coup with guns. They literally took out the president by force in Honduras, and now ever since '09 they've been under the control of the United States. And that's the history of South America. It ain't just leaders brought in by coups, brought in by at the barrel of a gun, and the United States gets to control them with a remote from D.C. And Honduras has been suffering terribly economically, and that's why there's been this influx of immigrants coming from there, because it's just hell there. And then it gets sent back to one of the worst living conditions in the Western world. You can say that in South America is the Western world, but I guess in the Western Hemisphere, Honduras. And what we're seeing is that it's some of these Central American countries, some of these countries in Central, most in South America, are at the brink of possibly having a Haiti effect happen. And they go from third world to ultra third world very quickly. as you can see, Haiti's been a country that's in Latin America been always been under poverty. It seems like it's really gotten worse ever since 2010. It's always been a country with a lot of suffering, a lot of it's all been a lot of problems, a lot of exclusion. That's almost forgotten about this country in the Caribbean. That's right there with the Dominican Republic. That's much well known, but people don't seem to talk about that country. They'll talk about the Dominican Republic. That's a little better off. People from Haiti, they try to run to the Dominican Republic, but the Dominican Republic doesn't really have the people of the Dominican Republic, I don't think, have a very good attitude towards Haitians. And Haiti's just, that's a country that's a complete disaster. 98% of our forests were deforested after the earthquake. Just extreme poverty in Port-au-Prince. And there'll be rich people right down the street, but right there's the slums right up the street. It's like, Havana was back in the 1950s, where, you could go to the casino and get your dick sucked in the brothels that's right next to the casino, and right behind it is some shantytown slums. It's the rich people would be completely oblivious. There's a mob ran strip where Luciano and other American mobsters just had safe haven. There was all kinds of criminals from around the world had safe haven in Havana back in the day. I can imagine Port-au-Prince is probably pretty similar. And there it was just anything went in Havana. And it was just all. There was also, and then behind that was the complete misery and poverty that was behind it. The misery went further than just the poverty. It went from the exploitation, it went from the military police, and the Haiti, a similar situation in Port-au-Prince today. But you can see that anywhere where the Western bankers' agenda touches, it ends up like that in Latin America or anywhere in the world. And with these terrible economic events happening at our backyard, how far will it take before it gets to here? You don't have anything to protect it. The bankers don't care if it crashes because they'll just get richer. That's what happened in 2009. That's what will happen again. The Federal Reserve dollars, it can't become U.S. dollars because it's printed by an entity not even belonging to the United States. It's a private bank. And more important than that is that it's not even ran by Americans practically. I mean, I think being private is more important, but it's not even run by Americans. It's ran by Europeans, a lot of them. And it's practically has the United States back in the control of a few super wealthy Europeans. It's not even the fact that that is Europeans that control. It's the fact that it's super wealthy Europeans, like back in the day when the British monarchy controlled the United States. Has much really changed since then? The situation that the United States is in now, and it's now we're 240 years since the American Revolution. And it's time for a second American Revolution before shit hits the fan, and then we're in real trouble because the martial law happens and we have the big war that has been talked about for years. But when the economy crashes, because it's not, the Federal Reserve dollar is not backed by anything besides what it's traded in. That's it. It's backed by oil. That's what it's traded in mostly. And there's a lot of countries that are not even trading. Pretty much like example, if Russia trades with a third world country like Turkey, well, they're not trading with Turkey right now. The trade was made Burma, or trades with Malaysia. We're not going to. Russia will most likely make sure that the transaction does not happen in fact, they will make sure that that transaction does not happen in dollars. That's what they're moving to. They're making sure they'll happen in rubles. And that used to be the case, especially like in the 90s, where even Russia was using the dollars to trade oil in. And they got to be, I think, maybe the biggest supplier of oil on the planet. So now when you have you have also like Iran, they're not trading dollars for oil. So when that starts to not happen, that's when all these big countries and some of these that's what I was talking about, major players not using dollars for oil. That's when trouble starts to really happen. And then the petrodollar loses a lot of its value. You have Syria, you have Iran, you have Russia, Venezuela, all these countries are refusing to trade oil for dollar. And there's only a few countries that still will. And the petrodollar is not backed by gold, it's not backed by silver. Most importantly, it's not backed by a precious metal. Let's simply put that way, that when it's not backed by a precious metal, there's nothing to back it when all the other factors collapse. Like, that's why back in the 1800s with the U.S. dollar, it was pretty much impervious to collapse. We had bad economic scenarios at that time, but nothing compared to what's about to happen now. Nothing compared to what happened in 1929. Nothing even compared to what happened in 2009. And not compared to what's going to happen now. People have been talking to us about the EU, and the EU, they've been looking to that there'll be possibly a collapse maybe the next. But they were talking. It looked like a collapse is going to happen in 2012, 2013. If the collapse hasn't happened yet, it definitely looks like that's going to happen next. With the poor EU countries collapsing and leaving the EU because they're forced to. The situation the EU has got them in got the country to the point of bankruptcy. So the EU, it looks like it's about to collapse the whole project as a whole. And when that happens, that's definitely going to reflect right back on the United States. It's like a chain of events from the more poor countries into the dollar start to collapse, and then the more bigger countries, you start talking about Spain, Greece, start to collapse, and then next possibly France, Italy, and then maybe the big one in Europe, Germany goes. Which Germany, yes, it doesn't look nearly as bright as it did just 3 years ago. In Germany, they were talking about the prosperous economy. They were talking about how it was going to become maybe the most fastest growing economy in the world. And now at this point, it's uncertain. Everything is uncertain right now in Germany. Politically, economically. Politically, it's uncertain. The fact that with different factions in the country feuding, and it seems over one thing in the background, the refugee crisis. But also economically, things are very uncertain in Germany. People are not talking the same way about Germany than they did 3 years ago. And back to the United States will be the ultimate result. And people will say, it's like, why would these super smart bankers, why would they make these obvious flaws in the system? Well, yeah, it's because they are super smart and they aren't intentionally doing this. It's very malicious and very heinous acts that they're going to do towards the West, and that's just going to those let it collapse. They don't care. They don't care what happens to 99.999% of us. But they're just going to let and they'll just take the money after that, and it'll just be a grand redistribution of wealth from the super poor and the middle class all the way up to the super rich. And we're talking about the billionaires here, folks. Folks, this is this is pretty imminent. I think the EU is very close, and I think the United States is pretty close as well. It's definitely this year or next year. And what could be happening? You could call it a collapse. You could call it a reset. Dollar might come back, but it's going to be a totally different way and a different format. I think what could possibly happen is that the uniting of the three countries in North America, Mexico, Canada, and the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, uniting and they're going to make a big union like they have in Europe, European Union, but it'll be the North American Union. And you see, there's a few warning signs, I think, and one of the warning signs will say is that, the border's unsecure, we have this immigration problem. Well, here's the solution, they'll say, is that we'll just make a union, and then there won't be a problem at the southern border. And the North American Union, I think, is very imminent. I think, and also, who knows what else could be combined. I think that in military, we could be talking about DC being a center of power for all three countries. I don't think it's very imminent. I think it's very imminent if they go down that route. There might be other things they might do in that scenario, but I think that's when we're talking about a reset of the dollar. That's what we're talking about. And then after that, the Federal Reserve will still print out the North American notes, but it won't be technically the U.S. dollar. It'll be a North American dollar or whatever, and they'll have the power of the three economies, and I guess it'll probably boost the trading of that around the world. And I guess they figured that they'll be able to force countries into trading or more countries into trading that for oil around the world. The North American Union, they were talking about it for 10 years ago, and it kind of dropped off. It's kind of, for me, it's one of those theories that I think is a little bit of a stretch because I haven't seen any signs of it. It could happen very imminent. Who knows? It could be like within just a few weeks' time, they start talking about it, and all of a sudden it happens. Maybe shortly after the selection or election, whatever you want to call it, coming up here in a couple months. Actually, 9 months. Pretty far away from 2 months. They were crawling along towards that November 2016 date. But definitely, there'll be a big event that will probably, if it happens, it definitely, and it will affect also, affect the people by, believe me, at that point, it's going to be like a prison. It's going to be a prison continent. It's not like it's going to give you freedom of travel to move all around the three countries. At that point, they'll probably have the FEMA districts where you won't be allowed to leave your 10-state area. But moving on to something else is that, I have noticed things with the TPP, this big agreement to get a lot of countries into excluding Russia, I think, is partially what the reason for the TPP, and it's also to secure the corporate rights, they'll say, it's corporate power, unlimited corporate power, and they treat corporations as people, and they can say, under the TPP, your country bans a product, that corporation can sue you for doing that, even if it's dangerous, even if it's unpractical. They could sue your country, even if it was by a popular vote, even if it was went through all the steps or whatever and still they could sue your country, which pretty much means they can sue your people over that, and that gives corporations ultimate power, and they will be able to censor the internet possibly with that, and we'll be seeing. Like that's probably even websites like the three websites that this show is broadcasted on. off the internet because it'll be considered hate speech, which they'll find an excuse because they can deem anything hate speech nowadays. They can tell people what's offensive, and people will believe it's offensive. The media tells them so. Which, at this point, I mean, I don't know if there's been ever a time where people have been so believing of their corporate media that's on TV. I don't even think before the internet, people were so trusting of the big three, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, or the other networks that used to exist were the bigger ones before those a couple of those got big. People now have become so subservient and they become so complacent. Maybe they believe it's bullshit, but they just won't research it or anything. I think for the most part, a lot of them still believe it. I don't know, but we are turning the tide on the information war. That's for sure. As even Hillary Clinton said that we're losing the information war, which that's what they're talking about. The United States government is losing the information war. They'll probably be shutting down RT, and then we won't be able to get to it on the internet in the future, possibly. That's probably that's what they're really talking about. I mean, there's these truther websites too that get a few thousand here, a few thousand there that view their website. But RT is now watched by millions of Americans, and there's a point possibly where RT could be one day the most watched media in the United States if it keeps going down a good trend. Right now, it's the third most watched, last time I checked. Third most watched international media in the United States behind Al Jazeera and BBC. And also, Al Jazeera is soon going to be gone, at least from the United States, I guess. I don't know how exactly that's going to work. But BBC, I think, is probably going to. I think it's fallen out of popularity. I think it was more of a popular thing made 20, 30 years ago when they used to be a little bit more edgy or whatever, I guess, than the big three here in the United States that wouldn't play anything any bit edgy. I guess BBC would sometimes go a little bit edgier, maybe on social norms, than to lure people into view. But it's always been it's always the big media has been always the biggest ones. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox have been drawing people for years to watch their shows in the millions. However, for example, it's till now, MSNBC right now, there's some times where they have like literally 1,000 viewers at one time. I mean, MSNBC, nobody's watching anymore. People that liked it made in the 2000s, well, they hated it now because it's even took a pretty noticeable jump down from 10 years ago. Right now, it's just filled with it's pretty much filled with everything's racist. If you don't like Obama, you're racist. If you don't go with the social norm, you are you're mentally ill and you need to be locked away. And it's full with a bunch of we need to ban all these words because they're offensive, or trigger warnings. Oh my God! I really, it's the land of crazy land that almost exists on Tumblr and parts of Facebook even nowadays. I mean, I think that Facebook, I don't know, it's made somewhat even of a noticeable turn for the worse when it comes to compared to like 3 years ago. I want to talk about truther websites. I don't know. It seemed like 3 years ago, truther websites were made better. Maybe there were more of them. I don't know. Some of the same truther websites that I left from like 3 years ago, they seem like they're all folded in or thrown in the towel at this point. There was that anti-Zionism, just to name the website right there on Facebook. It was great. They put up stuff every day. They put up artwork from David Dees, which he's a very talented artist. Very introspective, I guess. When you not really, because it really just throws it right out there. Read when you see his artwork or whatever. But it's really. I mean, I like this. I like this artwork. But they put that. They put articles. They put different different points of view, kind of, when it came to, like, it wasn't just like Alex Jones truth. It differed from that heavily. It was actually, I think, like truthers made from someone in the Middle East, I think, and they really call for unity, which a lot of these truther websites seem to exclude either Muslims or it seems like a lot of that, unfortunately, just exclusion of Muslims or whatever, and just they were calling for Christian, Muslim, really all religions need to stand up to Zionism and need to stand up for the people, stand up for the people, and the 99.99% against the New World Order, which it's the 99%. We're the 99%. That's almost like it's an erroneous statement. I get the point, but the thing is that 1%. 99. Yes, they control 99% of the money, but let's not forget that 400 people control 80% of the money. So really, what we're focusing on is that 400 people right there. But then that means that there's, it's so ridiculous. But no, it's really we need to just focus on that 400 people right there. I mean, it's really it's the 99.99%. Versus that 0.01%, even smaller than that. 400 out of 320 million. It's 320 million. 316,999,600 people are scrounging for that last 20% of the money in the United States. And it's not money; it's currency. And I'll explain to you what's the difference between that here in a second. The money is something that it's either a precious metal or it's something that's a certificate backed by precious metal, like gold and silver. Currency is just anything, a medium that the person doesn't have to be backed by anything, and the person that controls it, there's a person that controls it, like the Federal Reserve. That's who sets the value of it. Dollars. That's currency, United States dollar. Gold is money. We used to have money. It was the silver certificates that were issued up to 1913, and then for a short time during 1963. And then there actually were silver certificates well past 1913. Let me correct that statement. But it was being phased out already when the Federal Reserve was created up till I think the 30s is when they ended it. Around there, that's when you start to see the majority of the silver certificates. But that's a simple difference between currency and money. I know that I put that in the description, so might as well answer. I got to at least answer the questions I put in the description, or what I was talking about there. I can't just I can ramble on and talk about a lot of other stuff because it all connects to each other. That should almost be the bumper song. It should be Ramble On by Led Zeppelin, because that seems what I do a lot of times. When I don't have a co-host, I don't seem to have an anchor to keep me on topic, so I just go all over the place during the show. It's 2 hours. I could wander all over the place, wander all over the map of truth. And take you on the truth journey, man. I don't know why I just put the random stoner voice. That's like be entertaining. I remember all the accents I used to do on the show. I used to do the Italian guy accent. That was pretty funny. I haven't found a use of it. When I find a use of it, I'll probably try to do that again, or do my Bush imitations. I don't know. I might have lost my edge on Bush imitation. I had a couple of Alex Jones imitations there as well. I don't know. It seems like I put myself under the pressure of doing it or not. And on the radio show, I should practice outside the radio show before I do it on the radio show. Of the tend to be Alex Jones for a second. One time I had it like spot on. It's pretty funny. It was, if anyone wants to call in, 717-8296, we have about 50 minutes left of the show. And I was just talking about the TPP. There's many things that economically they're trying to achieve there. And also, it's a way of keeping wages the same way they are, and so there's no movement up of wages. And like, for example, we're seeing wages go, for example, in Vietnam and stuff in these countries, now it's $2.75, or in the United States, $7.25. They want to keep it where these wages will be set for the future, even if prices go up and big corporations move the prices further up. Food is going to skyrocket, and there won't be anything that people will be able to do. Also, another thing this will do, it's going to eliminate all kinds of unionizing, and there won't be no organizing of workers to make a union. Striking will be strongly prohibited, and really, in a way, striking has been limited with what is allowed in a strike now. I mean, you probably can ask your grandparents or something about what strikes used to be back in the day. It was literally, you cross that picket line, try to cross that picket line, and then you could get beat up. And it was successful that way, because nobody would go into the factory and work, and the boss was forced to raise the wages because they couldn't fill the workers' spots. I mean, the scams. I mean, I think at the very minimum, I mean, you almost have to be able to push them back. I mean, I'm not saying beat up anybody that's crossing the picket line, but all that, it's like with all these laws that say that it's assault or whatever, and also the fact that they just fire you instantly. I mean, that's the reason, is that you can't be replaced. You couldn't be replaced back then so easily, and they wouldn't fire immediately like they will today. But this, unions could be illegal again, which I say again, because it actually wasn't even legal till 1840 or something like that. And it can be completely illegalized. Unions have lost all their power that they used to have. I mean, they used to be pretty powerful back in the 60s and 70s. But now, unions could become completely obsolete because they'll ban them under the TPP in all these countries. Which, remember, it's not just one country in the TPP that's the United States. Of course, it's multiple countries that pretty much lock in trade with each other. And the corporations taking all the profits for that trading. So the TPP, it would be, those countries will be, Chile could back out of it. South America, Mexico is very likely to join. The United States has already passed it. Canada, I don't know, they're on their way to passing it. There's Vietnam on their way to passing. All these countries, the agreement has been passed. It's just up to the national legislators at this point whether to pass it for that country. And the United States passed it back in June, while everybody was concerned about the Confederate flag and gay marriage. I mean, how many times did we hear about that back then? It was just that tensions between countries. We almost went to war with Syria in the summer of 2013, but all we couldn't stop talking about was Trayvon Martin. We couldn't. And it was a tragic event, but it was played so much in the media. It was at that point it became a fluff story compared to the Syrian war, where it was literally talk about World War III and the destruction of a country, multiple countries, and the loss of 1 million lives. But I mean, when you're talking, I mean, yeah, you're literally talking about the comparison between that and destruction of a few countries and millions of lives lost. It was complete distraction. And we go back to 2014. There was all these events, was the escalation between Ukraine and Russia. Well, one of the main things they talked about was MH17 and the there kept, well, it was just a complete false flag, and it was a spin to say that Putin had ordered the shooting down that plane, pretty much. When the truth was actually, it was West Ukrainians that shot it down, but blaming it on the East Ukrainians. So the West would intervene into Ukraine and fight the East Ukrainians, just fighting for the homeland, fighting against fascism in that country that's being inflicted upon them by Kiev. Yes, the Russian government does support them, the East Ukrainians, but they don't support them by military-wise. And it's only by humanitarian support, not military-wise. But it wasn't even done by the East Ukrainian rebels. It was done by the West Ukrainians as fighter jets, as the investigation shown have set the United States finger pointing, saying, "Oh, look, those East Ukrainians did it." There's in the fluff story of 2015, ultimate one was this damn Caitlyn Jenner stuff, which they wouldn't stop talking about it, and I understand it's almost like they still won't stop talking about it. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, really, and it's not newsworthy whatsoever, and it's definitely not worth more than 2 seconds of anybody's attention. While we have the TPP was passed, which is extremely detrimental to the future of Americans and primarily working class Americans. We had, at the time, we had tensions between the United States and Syria rise again. We had major events happen in towards Iran and the Iran deal, which people would say was a great step of diplomacy or whatever towards U.S.-Iranian relations, but actually I think the Iran deal was a trick on the United States' part in order to lure Iran, or to lull them into a sense of comfort, a false sense of comfort, and then after that they're going to bomb and find a reason to invade, blame it on themselves, and then bomb them, like what they did to Saddam. And Saddam and Iran are a bit different, because Saddam, yes, it was true, he was a dictator. He was not democratically elected like the Iranian president is. And another thing is that the Iranian people have freedom of speech and overwhelmingly support the Iranian leader, compared to Iraq. No, it wasn't the same case, but it's the same method of invasion. And the reasons why the United States entered Iraq was not what they said. The reasons why they'll enter Iran is not what they said. As it'll be even more devastating to the Middle East when they enter Iran. And then they literally just roll it over. I mean, change the Q to an N, and now it's Iran, and we're going to say this and this, and now it's a whole different story. But they use the same playbook. The United States has been planning an invasion of Iran probably since like I said, they've been really planning it for at least 5 to 10 years. I would say at least 5 years. And Syria, they've been planning to invade for 10 years, well before the Syrian civil war even started. That's what WikiLeaks found out. And people wonder why WikiLeaks is so important and why they why they have Assange locked away in that embassy. Well, he can't leave or else he'll be immediately arrested. Is because this is pretty important information, gets out to the people, via WikiLeaks. And what Assange is doing, or has done, has leaked information from the secretive governments of the West and given it to the people. And I think that every now and then people need to be reminded Assange is still not free. Assange is still locked away, and we're going on almost 4 years now. He was put away in 2014, I'm pretty sure. In 2012, I'm pretty sure. And now we're talking about going on 4 years where Assange has been in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, which what will likely happen if Assange doesn't get out of there is that he possibly could die because his health is not the best. And the bullshit they went to for him, they remember what they started to say back in 2012 that he might have did rape or whatever, which they realized that, the investigators quickly came to the conclusion it was 100% falsified, and that was a complete wild accusation. Assange, that was just to try to extradite him back to Sweden, where he would likely be taken from Sweden to the United States. And London, the British government, has wasted something like $10 million just to try to get a chance at Assange if he ever tries to attempt to walk away and escape. Well, there will be police waiting for him, and they've been waiting for him for years. Years. I mean, Snowden, another whistleblower, he's still not permitted to come back home. And that's another thing I just wanted to bring up was if you want to think about this election actually voting for somebody, let me ask you a question. How many people actually support letting Snowden come home without going to jail? How many people actually support Snowden coming back alive? We had Donald Trump saying that he would assassinate Snowden. Well, saying he would get along well with Putin, who protects Snowden and supports Snowden for what he did by leaking the information to the American people, which he didn't commit an act of treason. Treason is doing something, that would have been him leaking the information to the enemy. Well, according to the United States government, that is treason because we're the enemy, the American people. We're all potential domestic terrorists. We're all potential revolutionaries, is a better way to put it, that could overthrow their power and end them once and for all. That's how they see us. At this point, they almost see us like the same way like the Matrix. They see humans as a virus. Matrix. That's a pretty good analogy of the world we live in. Matrix. I was actually on, I think, like today or yesterday. I was watching a little bit of it, and it's all the metaphors and all the whole out truth of it. And I guess the good acting of what is that guy's name? I know it's Fishborn's his last name. Can't think of his first name right now. Playing Morpheus, but the whole idea of the Matrix. I think it's almost a movie that every truther has to watch once, and I watched the first one once. I didn't watch the second and third ones in their entirety because I just didn't find the sequel doesn't. Very few movies I've actually found the sequel to be as good as the original, and very few movies actually find worth the time like The Matrix. The economic world we live in, definitely. People think that they look at the United States dollar in their wallet. They don't think anything of what it really is. They don't think what that means. That it's just a promissory note. It's an IOU. That's all it is. It's pretty much saying. It's pretty much saying when they hand it out that now you owe. Well, the United States owes the Federal Reserve bankers money just for printing that out, and then they charge the interest back to the American government, which defers it to the IRS, and then that leads to the taxes that we pay. Our income tax is purely because of the Federal Reserve, and that's why we're extorted every year like everybody will probably be in the next few months during tax season, because Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act 102 years ago under the table. Well, it probably was actually over the table, but we're talking in idioms right now, and I don't know why I like to make fun of the puns I can find in the idiom versus the actual thing I'm saying. But anyways, Woodrow Wilson signed that and put the Federal Reserve in action, and then America becomes completely bought out by the billionaires, and the United States would become conquested by the super rich bankers, the Rothschilds, which they had been trying to control the United States ever since it had been created. Ever since it split away from King George, it was a Rothschild puppet, and the British monarchy had been a Rothschild puppet. It had been a vehicle of the imperialism of the super rich, plunder, exploit the third world, and well, they practically saw the United States as almost a third world country over here in the New World, and Britain was exploiting territories all the way from here down into South America, even all through the Caribbean, into Canada, U.S. and Canada. They controlled. British North America was a gigantic territory, but then we split away. But even at the Declaration of Independence, some of those signatures you see there belonged to British agents. British had been always. They did many attempts early in America's history to try to reclaim it and try to hand it back to the bankers. And then there was the first attempt by Alexander Hamilton. That's the guy you see on the $10 bill. Is it? Good. I'm a mind blank here. But Alexander Hamilton, who was the treasurer under John Adams, tried to put the first central bank, and that would be controlled by big banking interests. However, somebody had a disagreement with it, and that would be Thomas Jefferson's vice president, who shot Alexander Hamilton and killed him in a duel. And after that, he wasn't put in prison or anything, because he was Thomas Jefferson's vice president. However, he did kind of fall out of favor with a lot of people, and then he went to Napoleonic France, which Napoleon was a big counter to the British Empire. Was fighting against the British Empire and was fighting against a lot of the old monarchical systems of debt slavery, as he had freed prisons full of debt slaves during his conquest of Europe. However, he was eventually stopped by the Russian Tsar, and then ultimately by the British Empire. Was really the ultimate end of Napoleon. But there was the big turning point was that I think it was 1812, or when he tried to go into Moscow, and the Tsar stopped them. However, like I said, debt slavery. That's the very old-fashioned way. You have so much debt that you become a slave, or you're put into prison. And they had debtors' prisons in the United States. I don't know. No, it wasn't. I don't know if they had them in Britain. I know that. And then debtors' prisons are actually possibly on their way back in the United States. Definitely, I mean, banks are getting all kinds of permissions that they've never had to claim on debt. Like they're allowed to bring thugs pretty much to your place of work and embarrass you in front of everybody, and then use intimidation to scare you into paying your money back. I think Bank of America has gotten permission to do that, and so now you got to be really careful if you fall into debt, because it's going to become a very serious offense. And well, going back to what I was saying is that the second attempt on the United States to put in a central bank and have the Rothschilds control it was under Andrew Jackson. People around Andrew, or actually before Andrew Jackson, and Andrew Jackson stopped it. They called him a viper of thieves, or a den of vipers and thieves, and he ended the central bank of the United States. And then after that, they didn't attempt it. It led to the success of the United States economy for the next 60 years or so. All the way, really the only major halt to it was the Civil War. Andrew Jackson, though, he actually survived 2 assassination attempts because of his attempts to, well, actually, wasn't attempts, but successful tries to eliminate the second bank of the United States, and then the third bank of the United States came, and he eliminated the second bank of the United States, but the third bank of the United States would come with the collaboration of the president, and that would be the Federal Reserve, and this time they weren't open about it. They made it very secretive, and nobody would know that this would be a private bank controlled by foreign interests. They got what they had wanted for a long time. They finally, and finally now we're seeing people finally waking up about the truth about the Federal Reserve, and people. And it seems like even these politicians, they cater sometimes to the people's demands that the Federal Reserve be at least audited at the very minimum. And now that seems to be the little mild concession, so we don't go out in the streets and do revolution, I guess, is that they'll say they'll audit the Fed, and I guess it's like, well, we had to see whether our boss was doing a good job, and we decided that, in fact, he is doing a good job, and we're not going to say anything because we're too scared of what will happen because he pretty much owns us. All of the Fed is a joke by if it's done by the federal government. And they'll say, oh, we'll reform the Fed or whatever, or but how many people actually just said straight out in the Fed? But they'll do all these little mild stuff in between in order to try to appease the people a little bit. But right now, what we're seeing is just some pandering before the election, and it's not because they're actually trying to win votes, because it doesn't matter because how many people vote. It's all their selection by the super rich. However, it's make sure we don't go out in the streets after the result happens and start actually causing chaos and then actually do a revolution, because that's the revolution is the only solution at this point. There's people think that doing a peaceful march throughout DC or whatever is going to do anything. No, it's armed protest is the very minimum. That's what needs to be done. You have militias protecting the protesters because they will fire on you. It's like, what happens when you try to meet with nonviolence to violent oppressors? Well, they shoot you unarmed. So peaceful opposition only works when your enemy is peaceful, which will never happen with the federal government. You see, they're willing to kill pregnant women and children in Waco, and that was just 20 years ago. They'll be willing to do something crazy like that nowadays to what they'll say on the media, armed hippie domestic terrorist or whatever. They won't even say armed. They'll just say hippie protester domestic terrorist. I don't know. Hippie domestic terrorist. That sounds pretty catchy. And then most of the people will support it. And most people are so cheap and complacent that they'll just believe anything that the mainstream media tells them without question, because they're afraid what will happen. They'll be considered not normal. Even at a young age, if you start to act not normal, they'll medicate you and put you on many pills and turn young kids into drug addicts. It's a first step of Big Pharma is often stepping in and putting these pills for ailments that kids get or all ADHD that they misdiagnose. So I don't think that, I don't think that it's complete falsity that ADHD exists. I think that some people legitimately have it, but I think it's misdiagnosed so many times they get it handed out all over the place because, number one, more money to be made. Number two, they want it starts a cycle of false trust in the pharmaceutical companies from a young age, and then all the way up to the point of being, in your adulthood, and then when you're an old person, you end up taking, some people 50 pills a day, maybe. Some people just do crazy amounts of pharmaceuticals. And pharmaceuticals, so I'm saying, drives the deck of cards economy that we have. It's the reason why probably won't ever see weed legalized on a federal level. And you'll probably see even these 4 states, my prediction is that it's going to go back on it in a few years probably. They'll say that's dangerous. They say there's a lot of problems happened during the legalization of weed, and they'll probably go back in these 4 states. I mean, Alaska's already done that. They went back and forth a couple times. They legalized it about 40 years ago. They re-legalized it somewhere in between then and now, and then they legalized it again in 2014, I think. So now Alaska is legal once again. There's now of course it's Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. The pharmaceutical companies, they know that weed could literally cure many different diseases. It's a treatment for many problems with many diseases, and it's a treatment for many mental diseases there's many mental problems that can be treated by weed, but the fact that it does alleviate stress, and then weed, then alleviating stress leaves the root gets rid of the root of a lot of mental disorders, which is ultimately stress, which can lead to anxiety. Well, stress is anxiety. Anxiety can lead to a lack of sleep, maybe, and that's honestly, weed gives you. I'd say stress and lack of sleep is probably the root of many mental diseases. But these mental diseases that people have here in the United States, by a lot. I mean, it's 25% of the country or something like that has one thing or another. And then a lot of people in this country chronically ill with other stuff, but we could treat that. But the pharmaceutical companies, they rack in on the money on that, and it's also can cure 34 compounds of cancer. And pharmaceuticals, with the under the TPP, there are a lot of price hiking, a lot of price. The prices it could be very hard for some countries to get certain pharmaceuticals after the TPP is passed. The TPP, a lot of stuff like what we saw was that Martin Shkreli or whatever, the guy that raised the AIDS medication to $750 a pill. It was $750 a pill, and then went up to $750 a pill or something like that. This did the extreme price gouging on that, and that could happen all over the place. And somebody actually stepped in and made it $1 or something, back to $1 a pill alternative. So it pretty much made that whole plan by Martin Shkreli not possible. But still, we can see a ton of those cases happening under the TPP. It would affect a lot of third world countries where they wouldn't even be able to get certain medications through the TPP. It's Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's what people that just tuned in, that's what it stands for. The TPP also, some other huge ramifications about it. Another big one I would say is definitely it can crack down on. I think that even bad mentions of it, I think that like one of the main things is the secrecy around it. It was so secretive that you couldn't even read it before the signing, and there's just so many clauses in there that's worse than anybody could have possibly imagined. Now that it's actually been released, some of it, I guess, or maybe the whole thing's actually been released to the public, where you can actually go and read it. But the thing is so bad. TPP is so bad. I think that even like any protests about it in the country will pretty much the government's be highly suggested to crack down on it in a violent fashion, pretty much. I mean, I don't know. I just saw there was all the other stuff about it just seemed mute at that point after about the point of corporations suing people over bad PR, corporations corporations banning unions under the TPP, and the price hikes under the TPP of medications. And of course, the pharmaceutical companies are going to love it, because every pharmaceutical company will be able to raise the prices of everything, and it'll be protected by the TPP because it's the ultimate lawyer practically. It's just an agreement that could just go back. Hey, look, this is the law of the land now. It's a law of the TPP. It is new laws that have been placed upon different countries, and 12 different countries are going to face this. Singapore, Vietnam, Brunei. People don't even know what Brunei is. It's literally a country that is just a really corrupt monarchy in Southeast Asia that literally just makes all their money off of shipping. It's almost exactly like Singapore, but it's by Indonesia. Anyways, if anybody is still wanting to call in, I'll put up the number here one more time, since we're about 18 minutes left of the show. It is 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296. No, I was thinking. I was thinking next week is going to be a pretty. I guess I'll just talk about the title of the show at the end of the show. But I thought I had something pretty special planned out for next week, and that'll be the last show of January. It seems like kind of a long January because it's been. Usually we don't get It just depends on the month, but we have 5 shows 1 month, and that'll be it for January. And we've done some we kicked off the year pretty good, didn't we? I mean, we talking about the USS Liberty show was probably almost the highlight so far 2016. We had last week was a pretty decent show, even though. Which last week was surprising. I was able to even pull off that show that well because I was feeling really under the weather that day. And now that I've pretty much kicked that thing, I was able to perform with the same kind of performance that I was doing before I got sick. I was actually starting to feel pretty shitty during that show during the USS Liberty. And then I was really feeling under the weather last week. Now, we'll finish off the show with a few more notes that it's sovereignty of a country's economy at this point is very important, because if you are connected to the World Bank or the IMF in any way, your country's going to crumble in the next few years. With many indicators saying so, we have a lot of countries in the world are still tied to the IMF and World Bank. We have just a few countries that have kicked out the Rothschilds around the world. And that's really the main one, because the Rothschilds, when they have control of your central banking, they have control of your country. It's like that Rothschild said, give me control of give me control of the country's money. I don't care who is in charge because I'll be in charge. It's in charge quotations because the person that's really in charge is the Rothschilds. They can have their president or whatever, but they don't have any real power when their money is controlled by somebody else. Your money must be controlled by the people, and the currency. Well, the currency, because unless it's money, which is in countries where the bankers take charge, they make it work as currency, and it's currency. It's not gold and silver. They decide what is the value of it. The currencies also, they have to be decentralized as well. There should be decentralized, like they had in the old United States or whatever. There was no central bank. And what Andrew Jackson advocated for was local banking. He advocated for making the biggest state bank in every state. He decided it would kind of just go up to the states also whether they would have one or not, or just be up to local banks, as he also believed in states' rights heavily. And also, just to make clear, I don't support Andrew Jackson's legacy during the Seminole Wars and during its campaign against the Native Americans. But I'm talking about what his economic policies were right now. His economic policies, what he did against the bankers, I mean, that was incredible because he actually successfully beat the bankers. So did Aaron Burr, Tom's vice president, but he didn't go down a hero at the end of it. They pretty much ostracized him and told him to leave the country at one point, and he left the country, and he became just pretty much a hermit over there. From away from American society. He might have been very well known over there in France, and he might have been out and about and actually enjoying himself and meeting with the French people there. But here in the United States, he did not go down that much of a hero. The fight wasn't even close to over. Andrew Jackson ended the fight for about 60 years until the big bankers got enough power to buy out the United States pretty much, which happened in 1913. But the sovereignty of a country is really, it's all on the economics, or in having your own resources and using your own resources, and the people of your own country producing what's necessary for a country, in your nationalization of resources. I say it's pretty important, and your country's food all being provided from inside your country. Because if you don't have that, well, you don't really have much. Right now, what we're seeing with the United States, you see almost none of that. I mean, the United States is relying on international bankers for everything. In the past, it wasn't, and other countries are not right now. In Russia, they've kicked out the international bankers, and they've sent their arrest warrants after Rothschild, and Soros also was another big collaborator against Russia. It's kind of a whole different story, but the former Nazi that's also now a Democratic Think Party funder. I said think tank. Funder, party funder. He was trying to, he's just trying to antagonize Russia into World War III. So they put sanctions on, to put more sanctions on Russia. But in response, they just put sanctions on him, and then well, they had to put an arrest warrant after him. So Soros ever was to come to Russia, he'd be immediately arrested for many crimes that he had committed during his time in international politics. Soros is a bit different than the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds are the ones that were actually caused at the head of the 90s collapse towards in Russia. In 98, the financial collapse by people like Goldman Sachs and the other. Actually, the Goldman was one of the people from the Sachs family. But from Goldman Sachs, we're trying to restructure the Russian economy to be Western oligarch friendly. But Russia also jailed all the oligarchs, and all those billionaires were put in jail. Khodorkovsky was pretty much, he was released actually after a while, but now the people do not trust him. The people would never let him get to power unless he's willing to do some kind of extravagant political coup against Putin. He's not getting the power. But he seems to be a person that suffers from delusion of grand delusions. Grand delure, I don't know here. It's getting late in the show. But he is but he's definitely someone that the bankers have been trying to put in a position of power for a long time. The Putin administration has been trying to do attempts to knock down Putin and then put him in the power vacuum. However, it seems very unlikely to happen, especially when 89% of the people support Putin. And if anything were to happen to Putin, they would make sure that a suitable replacement would come in and not Khodorkovsky or somebody else that the bankers designated for Russia to be controlled by. Russia is a sovereign economy. Iran right now is under a pretty sovereign economy without the Rothschild bankers in charge. And they have, they had for a long time the oil being able to bring in revenue via that. But the problem is right now that without anybody with the amount of people that can sell oil with diminishing because the oil war for Saudi Arabia has devalued oil by selling it so cheaply, where Iran is suffering from that, and now their economy is not suffering what the bankers thought it would. And same thing for Venezuela, is that they thought they would be completely bankrupt by now, but they're not completely bankrupt by now. People can argue all they want to say that they're this state or whatever of the economy, but the people are doing pretty fine. I mean, and I talk to a lot of Venezuelans, and that the right-wing media in the United States and the right-wing media in Venezuela can lie all they want about what state Venezuela is in due to the socialist government. However, that's caused by international bankers. That's caused by sanctions put on by the United States. However, the government, before all this was going on, was providing was going very far along the missions of education, the missions for housing, and brought millions of Venezuelans out of poverty and millions of Venezuelans out of the grips of illiteracy. Which can be almost as bad as well, of course. Even in a country where that's not 100, it's almost unimaginable to think that people can still be illiterate in the United States, which they'll say, well, yeah, 99% of the United States is not. 99% of the United States is illiterate. However, I would say that if you can only read to a third grade level, you're not literate. Shit, that's. I'd say it's a lot more people are literate than you think in the United States. But down in Venezuela, that's almost been gone. The literacy of the past, where I think in the past it was probably close to 20% of the people couldn't read or write, and now everybody can read and write. There's been mass progress there socially, but definitely to avoid it's very hard to actually avoid the kind of things they do when you've actually lost the grip of the international bankers. They try to reattach the pressure in different ways, and the different ways can range from sanctions. It can range from predators trying to devalue your money. It can also range to what they're like the big with different wars of commodities where they start selling something very low, so you can't sell your commodity because your commodity is because you can't sell your commodity at that price. The other country has more of it, or you just don't. Well, you don't have the ability to sell that commodity at the same price that they do. Saudi Arabia, they can easily sell that oil at $27 a barrel because they figure that by the time they will need to sell at a higher price, they'll drove their competition bankrupt. However, I think it's highly unlikely it's actually going to happen because it's going a lot slower than they expected. Because what they were hoping right now is that Iran's economy would be sputtering and that Venezuela's economy would be done and they'd be bankrupt. However, that's not happening. Russia's not even suffering; they're actually coming back. But they still have the natural gas to West Europe. West Europe got themselves reliant on Russia's natural gas, and now they can have something like in some countries, 90% of the natural gas comes from Russia. I don't think some countries. I think it is West Europe in general. 90% of their what they rely on for heat is coming from Russia. Actually, we are coming to the end of the show. We're just 4 minutes from the top of the hour. I can't believe the time went by like that. I mean, it seems like the first hour sometimes goes by pretty slow, and then the second hour speeds right up. I mean, you start seeing 10:10, 10:20, 10:30, 10:40, 10:50 all of a sudden reaches. Now it's 10:55. Then just another week has went by for Voice of Rebellion Radio. Definitely, with economics. It's funny. It's funny because it is a little bit hard to actually spruce up and make actually fun for everybody to listen to. I mean, economics. You got to put in. Sometimes you got to show a big picture. Sometimes try to avoid away from all the statistics because I think when you get into the statistics, actually, sometimes it gets pretty boring. But I think we're able to make a pretty entertaining show about that, and it's. Hopefully, everybody was informed by what is now going on. In one of the main things is oil, this oil war, and hopefully people stop saying, "Oh, look how cool the oil is now $1.27," but don't realize the vast ramifications of them putting $1.27 gas in their car, which is not even $1.27 in Florida. It's like $1.80 still. Apparently, some people are saying that's dropped to around $1. Apparently, prices. It's dropped to prices that hasn't even been around in 15 years. But I don't think so. That's what they set up in Michigan. Prices are, but for some reason, I'm a little bit skeptical. Anyways, tomorrow, the next week's show coming up. We'll just say maybe it might be a good show if you have a friend that never has learned about it's just starting in the truth movement and hasn't really started their research, or needs somebody to, a guide on how to find all the proper information and actually get start in researching and start learning the truth about the New World Order and learn the truth about politics in the United States and learn the truth about economics and learn the truth about all these different cultural aspects that go into the equation and these different wars and stuff. That'll be next week's show. Anyways, I think we're about to reach the bumper any second now, as it is
Running no return and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad that commented, kill the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. My name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country. Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds him. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never